Well, we already have some reaction for you. Labour organisations have welcomed the appointment of Dan Morakane as Eskom's new CEO. Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan has confirmed the appointment after the advertisement attracted more than 400 applications. It's not clear at this stage when Morakane starts his new job. The post became vacant after Andre de Ruyter resigned late last year before leaving earlier this year. Morakane has previously worked at Eskom as head of Group Capital and is currently the CEO of sugar producer Tongaat Hewlett. Now to the global story that we're following for you tonight. A vote on a new Security Council draft resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza has been delayed by several hours to allow for consultation between Arab and Muslim foreign ministers and the United States to continue in Washington. The new draft and vote was scheduled after Secretary General Antonio Guterres invoked Article 99, a rare diplomatic UN Charter tool. In a letter to the Council this week, Guterres formally warned the body of the imminent collapse of the humanitarian system in Gaza and the risks to peace and security in the region. The US, which holds veto powers in the Council, is currently backing Israel's position that any ceasefire would only benefit Hamas. Guterres addressed the Council in the last hour.
I wrote to the Security Council invoking Article 99 because we are at a breaking point. There is a high risk of the total collapse of the humanitarian support system in Gaza, which would have devastating consequences. We anticipate that it would result in a complete breakdown of public order and increased pressure for mass displacement into Egypt. I fear the consequences could be devastating for the security of the entire region. We have already seen the spillover in the occupied West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. There is clearly, in my view, a serious risk of aggravating existing threats to the maintenance of international peace and security. The risk of collapse of the humanitarian system is fundamentally linked with the complete lack of safety and security for our staff in Gaza, and with the nature and intensity of military operations, which are severely limiting access to people in desperate need.
All right, for more, we speak to SABC News' correspondent in the US, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, who joins us from the UN headquarters in New York. Sherwin, thank you for bringing us that. I mean, Guterres' position is very clear that yet more lives are at stake. So then why the delay in this vote, given the desperate situation in Gaza?
Yeah, the urgency of the moment doesn't speak to a delay, Francis, right? But we do understand that Arab foreign ministers from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation that have been visiting all 5 countries that have permanent status within the Security Council, starting in Beijing, China, some weeks ago. They are now in Washington, D.C., and there's a scheduled meeting around 4 p.m. Eastern time here in the United States, around 11 p.m. South African time, where they are due to meet with the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken to lobby for the United Arab Emirates draft resolution that was introduced here earlier this week, demanding, Francis, a humanitarian ceasefire, reiterating its demand that all parties comply with their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law, which speaks to the protection of civilians, and further demands the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. Over 130 hostages still held by Hamas in Gaza, as well as ensuring humanitarian access to these hostages, for example, allowing the Red Cross to visit them. Francis, let me just reiterate some of the key points presented by the Secretary General in what really can be framed as a hard-hitting speech to the Council after invoking Article 99 earlier this week. He says the threat to the safety and security of United Nations staff in Gaza is unprecedented. More than 130 UN colleagues have been killed since Israel's bombardment in response to the Hamas attack on October 7th has killed. This is the largest single loss of life in the history of the United Nations. The situation is simply becoming untenable, says the Secretary General. Conditions for the effective delivery of humanitarian aid no longer exist. The crossing point at Rafah, right, the only crossing point that is allowed for humanitarian access into Gaza via Egypt, was not designed for hundreds of trucks and is a major bottleneck. People are desperate, fearful and angry. In some cases, they've expressed anger towards UN staff. Over 60% of Gaza's housing has reportedly been destroyed or damaged. Some 300,000 houses and apartments. 85% of the population have been forced from their homes. The people of Gaza are being told to move like human pinballs, ricocheting between ever smaller slivers of the south without any of the basics of survival provided to them. Nowhere in Gaza is safe, says the Secretary General. Gazans are running out of food, Francis. In the north, 9 out of 10 people have spent at least one full day and night without food. Gaza's health system is collapsing while needs are escalating. The unsanitary conditions in shelters and severe shortages of food and water are leading to increases in respiratory infections, scabies, jaundice and diarrhea. Then he also spoke to the brutal terror attacks inflicted on Israel on October 7th. The terror attacks unleashed by Hamas. He unreservedly condemned them again. I'm appalled by reports, he said, of sexual violence directed at women, and we understand not only women. There is no possible justification for the deliberate killing of some 1,200 people, including 33 children, injuring thousands and taking hundreds of hostages. At the same time, the brutality perpetrated by Hamas can never be justified in terms of the collective punishment we are now seeing of the Palestinian people. And so we raised the question about, given the urgency presented by the Secretary General, why then the delay? It was addressed by France's Ambassador Nicolas de Revier a short time ago, casting further doubt on whether we might actually see a vote later today. Francis, let's watch what he had to say.
My point is that we need an agreement. The last thing the Security Council needs today is another showdown and another failure. So I don't think we need a resolution that will be rejected. I think it will lead us nowhere. I think it will be a disaster. So what we need is an agreement. And we are 15 members, so we need to talk, we need to engage, we need to discuss further. So we need to combine two constraints. First, there is an emergency. I think the situation is tragic, so I don't think we can wait forever. But rushing to a vote without negotiating would be a big mistake. So I think 5:30 p.m. is too early. I'm not sure we will get to an agreement, so we will need the necessary time to really negotiate and to make sure that all members of the Council can agree on a text, meaning that there will be no objection by one permanent member or others.
So a key meeting to look forward to later this afternoon between those Arab and OIC foreign ministers, with Antony Blinken now seeking to put further diplomatic pressure on the United States to perhaps not deploy a veto in that council resolution if a vote were to come up later today. But of course, the United States has the ear of the Israelis, and the Israelis are saying they do not believe the time is right for a ceasefire because that would only benefit Hamas, in their view, Francis.
Sherwin, earlier this week, we saw you challenging the spokesperson for Antonio Guterres, saying, why is he invoking Article 99 when these stances, I guess, have already been taken, for example, that of the United States? He suggested that this is to really underscore the issue. Do you think this is a test, perhaps, of the sway of the Secretary General over these very powerful members of the Security Council?
Article 99, Francis, has not been used that often over the decades. I think the last time it was used was in 1989 over the Lebanon war. So that speaks to a rather large number of decades, a few decades since it was last deployed. And that doesn't necessarily tell us that there haven't been conflicts in the period since, right? Most recently, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In fact, the Israeli ambassador a short time ago, Gilad Erdan, raising the question as to why it was invoked on the Gazan conflict, but not on on other conflicts, including Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which, we can make a comparison of if we needed to. So I think it speaks to the moment we are in, Francis. The Secretary General deploying every tool he has in his toolbox here. Article 99 are not often used, and I think it speaks to the real seriousness with which the Secretary General is regarding what's happening in Gaza, the breakdown of the health system, the breakdown of the humanitarian system, the inability of the United Nations to provide. In fact, the Palestinian envoy, Riyad Mansour, saying, we call on you in the name of humanity to vote for this ceasefire. We have 2 million hostages in the Gaza Strip. Look, the humanitarian system, the ability to provide aid is breaking down, and these people are suffering day in and day out here. And I think the Secretary General, in his own words, feels that to not deploy Article 99 would not speak to the desperation we are seeing on the ground, Francis.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Sherwin. Bryce-Pease reporting live from Washington, and currently delayed, but we'll follow that vote or that discussion and see if there is any sort of agreement.